HBO's Task gave us a reminder of just how good TV can be, and this finale was no exception. So let's break down the episode, explain the ending, and talk about what lies ahead for Maeve and the kids, Little Sam, and Agent Tom Brandis and his family. And then we'll talk about how I think this series could become the next True Detective and serve as a great new anthology series with other big names taking on the leading role in future Task cases. Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and the limited series Task stars Mark Ruffalo as FBI agent Tom Brandis, leading a task force to find a missing kid, Sam, and bring down a vicious gang of bikers. But that's just the surface story. This was really a story about forgiveness and the gray nature of morality. So this finale tied up a lot of loose ends while simultaneously leaving them somewhat open to interpretation. Will Grasso get jail time for being a dirty cop, despite doing the right thing in the end? Probably, as he should. Maybe a reduced sentence is called for, but he still has to answer for what he did, and in a roundabout way, he is responsible for many of the heinous acts that the Dark Hearts gang have committed over the years. Then there's the question of, did Maeve really get to keep that $1 million in cash? Hell yeah, she did, and the way they did that was awesome. Getting to see Tom slowly lean over and zip the bag of cash closed and then delivering this awesome line about wisdom.
You know what they say about wisdom, Kath? No. It's knowing what to overlook.
And then there's the question of Ethan's sentencing and whether or not he'll be going away for the killing of his mother. Yeah, probably so, but again, this is a series about putting sin in perspective, so with Ethan being sick when he did what he did, he'll likely receive some form of leniency, as he probably should. And let's start there with Ethan, because while Ethan is not in this series all that much, he really does represent the entire theme of the series. Ethan's illness is an amplified depiction of how some things are just out of our control. Feelings of grief and revenge and the actions that we commit when feeling those emotions can be, chemically speaking, just as out of our hands as a mental illness that puts voices in your head. Now, Ethan's case, yes, it's more extreme. He needs literal medication to treat his problem, and he may very well belong in some type of facility if he is a danger to himself and others. But with characters like Tom, Grasso, and Robbie, it's more gray than that. They all have voices in their head, in a less literal sense than Ethan, of course, but there is a still small voice in each of them, which is the name of this episode. A still small voice means the voice in your head that we know as our conscience. Some would even call it the voice of God. And with Tom being a former priest, that tracks. In the Bible, the prophet Elijah encounters God, but not in the loud, boisterous voice that he was expecting. Instead, it is a still, small voice that can be easily missed if you aren't listening for it. This, of course, is a metaphor for one's conscience and one's own moral compass that can often be ignored if you allow yourself to become deaf to that voice inside you. That voice that tells you right from wrong. At its core, Task was a story about redemption and forgiveness. Tom, Robbie, and Grasso were all men who had fallen from grace. Tom, a former priest who was struggling to forgive his son for the unintentional murder of his wife. Grasso, a dirty cop who is living with the guilt of the death of Lizzie. And Robbie, even in death, his journey and his moral struggle now continue in Maeve. So as we know, Tom has taken in Sam, and despite his good intentions, it has become clear that one of the driving reasons behind him fostering Sam lies in the fact that he, as a former priest, is feeling great guilt for not being able to forgive his own son, and a feeling that he, as Ethan's father, has failed him. But really, Tom isn't having trouble forgiving Ethan. He's having trouble forgiving himself. Tom doesn't blame Ethan for the death of his wife. Tom blames himself for what he views as his failures as a father that not only resulted in the death of his wife, but now his son facing a life in prison. So at the end of the episode, when Tom says that he forgives Ethan, this is really Tom forgiving himself. If you watch closely throughout the season, when Tom talks about Ethan, he doesn't actually seem angry with Ethan. He doesn't seem to have any animosity toward his son. He is really just mad at himself for what he views as his own personal failure of protecting his family, protecting his wife from Ethan's unmedicated rage, and protecting Ethan from his own illness. Tom feels like he has broken the vow that he made to protect his wife, and he feels like he has broken the vow that he made to give his adopted son a better life than he would have had he not been adopted. And this all connects to Tom's faith and his feeling feeling of having broken a vow to God, aka his own moral compass, his conscience, that still quiet voice. And this theme of protecting and taking care of your family, it is found in Grosso and Robbie as well. Grosso is a dirty cop, but he does what he does out of this desperation to take care of his family.
It wasn't some colleague giving us a deal. I paid the money.
And Robbie, of course, has this vengeful feeling for Jason, who killed his brother, but Robbie's main task, if you will, has always been protecting his family and ensuring that they have a prosperous future. He wants to break this cycle of poverty and crime that has seemed to have plagued his family. Now, Robbie Pendergrass was no doubt a bad guy, but that doesn't mean that he was a bad guy. He has a huge heart and a determination to avenge the death of his brother and take care of his family. And sure, was there greed involved? Yeah, but in the penultimate episode, it became clear that Robbie was willing to sacrifice his own life so that his family, not just his children, but Maeve as well, could escape this toxic loop that their family had been stuck in and finally leave this town and start a new life somewhere else. Robbie had a plan, and he knew that that plan would likely end with him either in custody or dead, and he was okay with that. In many ways, Robbie, Grosso, Tom, and Maeve are all these selfless adoptive parents. Robbie enters this life of crime to, yes, get one over on Jason, but also to get money to take care of his family. We also see him become a temporary adoptive father to Sam. Again, Robbie may be a bad guy, but he's nowhere near as bad as Jason. He's not a real bad guy. A real bad guy would have offed Sam immediately in that first episode, but no, Robbie took Sam in. Granted, he had just participated in killing Sam's parents, so I'm not painting him as a saint, but there's still this interesting parallel of adoptive fathers with Tom, Robbie, and Grosso, as well as an adoptive mother with Maeve, who has become the adoptive mother to Robbie's children, and she serves as a mother of sorts to Sam as well. Now, the reason I loop Grosso into that adoptive father theme is because he also entered a life of crime to take care of his sister's children. And then, of course, Tom, who is a literal adoptive father, fits that bill as well. Now, another common theme between these four characters and the task at hand that they are all facing is grief. Tom's grief for his wife, Grosso's grief for Lizzie, Robbie's grief for his brother, and Maeve's grief for her father. And then come this episode, she is facing her grief for Robbie. But all four of these characters end up growing and maturing by learning to let go and appeal to their better angels. And that's what I loved about this series as a whole. And in the final moments of the episode, when we see Tom experience that still small voice as he peers out of his bedroom window after having given the room a fresh coat of paint, this fresh coat of paint symbolizing a baptism of sorts, cleansing him of his sin and the grief and torture that he had been feeling, and he is ready now to forgive himself and embrace the next chapter of his life and the next task at hand. Tom is no longer trying to control the noise around him and make sense of it all. Instead, he is listening, and when he listens, the noise fades away and what he needs to hear finally comes through. To pull again from the Bible, where they talk about the still small voice and they talk about the wind, the earthquake, and the fire that came before it, that wind, earthquake, and fire has also plagued the life of Tom, Ethan, Robbie, Maeve, and now all of them, that has finally passed, and they are all now moving on to that next chapter. And this scene with Tom at the end, it mirrored the moment of silence that we saw in the final seconds of the previous episode when Robbie too was finally able to rest and he drifted into death, but also drifted into a moment of peace, knowing that that money that, he sold drugs to get, that money would still likely make its way to his children and Maeve and be kept away from the hands of Jason. Okay, so that was the finale, the series finale supposedly, and I thought it was really good. And this show, it's called a limited series, meaning that there are no plans to continue with a season 2. So no, I wouldn't suspect that we'll be seeing Agent Tom Brandis again, or Maeve and the kids, or any of those characters, but I do think that we could still see another season of Task following a whole new FBI task force and another big movie star like a Mark Ruffalo in the leading role. Similar to how another great HBO show, True Detective, is a contained series, but with multiple seasons. True Detective takes place in the same universe, but each season follows a new set of detectives that are typically played by big movie stars like Woody Harrelson, Matthew McConaughey, Colin Farrell, Mahershala Ali, Jodie Foster, I could go on. And I think Task could follow that formula and be another series that continues the story on a thematic level, exploring the human condition and things like grief and forgiveness, but told through another FBI task force with another leading man or woman and a great supporting cast of characters around them. And maybe we could even have some crossover where another character like maybe Aaliyah shows up and is part of of this new task force, and we get vague mentions of the task force that she had been on before. I also think that Scarlett Johansson would be an amazing choice for another season of Task if she'd be willing to do TV and fill that big movie star leading role like Ruffalo did, but it can be difficult to get a movie star to do TV sometimes, so we'll just have to see. Anyway, guys, I really enjoyed this series. I hope to see another season with another task force. Let me know if you guys would as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and the season overall, and any names that you would like to see in a potential season 2 of Task if they end up going that anthology series route. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every time we upload a new video. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.